Hello there, welcome. My name is Amy. How you doing? Thank you so much for joining in this bit of a story time that I have going on here. Back when I was about 20-ish, I had the most incredible dream. At the time, it was so inspiring, and that was more than enough, right? But over time, I've been able to hear and read about similar experiences. Some, thank you to those who have even shared them right here on YouTube. I feel like I've come to the point where I can't help but wonder, did I dream of heaven?
Yeah.
I've always had a thing for fairies. Not like the cutesy garden types, but I can be a bit mischievous, but in a very silly way, I swear. And in my dream, I was a fairy princess. And I was sitting next to a tree, which was alongside a river. And the river itself isn't very wide at all, but I know that it's so deep, it could be endless. It's the river of tears. Every tear from anyone who's cried throughout history, and even those yet to be shed. I was crying, and my tear ran down my body, through the blades of grass, and into the river to join the others. My father, the king, had plans for me, hopes. I have a purpose, right? However, I didn't want to do what everyone expected of me. I wanted to do my own thing. I really, really wanted to explore. And I'd learned of a doorway, a portal, if you wish, that leads to the human world. And all I wanted to do was go through it. I was like Ariel, right? I just wanted to be where the people are. And my father, on the other hand, I can't blame him. He just wanted me safe, happy. It wasn't like I had nothing to do. The kingdom certainly wasn't boring. I just needed to explore. I wanted to chase that horizon, right? Gotta go. People to meet, places to see. I was so thirsty, wanting to see it all, know it all, learn, anyway. Think about being a fairy princess. What exactly is a princess going without? You can seemingly have anything, right? Even the grass. It was so green and vibrant. How could any other yard be better, right? And as I sat next to this river, though, I knew that inside the castle that sat up on this hill, overlooking this open glen or what have you, this grassy knoll, I guess, was my father. And he was meeting someone, another prince, who may be the perfect match for me. Let's talk about this castle real quick. The sidewalks, the trees, and the immense forest surrounding this open area that I was in. It was all so vibrant. This beautiful, perfect sky with its puffy rabbit tail clouds and just brilliant blue. And the trees, they were green I don't know the name for. No emerald nor plant compares. And the sidewalks, they weren't concrete. They were crystals and gems like rose quartz and amethyst and peridot. Everything was so vibrant in that gorgeous sunlight. Human eyes would require sunglasses, yet that was fine. Didn't bother me at all. And that castle itself, it was also made of crystals and gems and diamonds. It shone, just sparkled away up on that hill. It must have been seen for miles, and you would think the walls would be clear, ish, but you couldn't actually see inside through the walls. The sidewalk, as beautiful as it seems, like it winds its way into and through those woods, and like I knew that it was a lovely walk and that I went through there nearly every single day. 'Cause all that passive knowledge and dreams, right? Like, I loved being outside. The smell of all that nature, to me, it was intoxicating. And yet, here I was, sitting by this sacred river, feeding it my own tears. I was tethered. If I could put it like human words to it, I knew that there was more, and I didn't understand why I couldn't experience it like the others. Like, why was I special? I was his very own daughter, of course, which it feels weird to say because it's not the same as we may consider it. Like, I knew that I had many, many siblings, and each of us were so special to him, so important. And like, it feels like humanity, like we think we know words like immaculate and love, but it's so diluted, right? It's too apart from. But like, in that way that we know so much in such a split second within dreams, I also knew that my father really was trying to do right by me. And this guy, he might even surprise me. I know I was being stubborn. I knew it in that moment too. But I knew how important it was to me, how it felt. To him too, though. So when this guy comes like strolling up behind me, I may have been a bit flippant with him. Like, I wasn't interested in meeting someone else's prince, you know? If he wanted to be a traveling companion and go on an adventure with me, cool. But he wasn't going to help my father change my mind. And this guy, like, now that all those movies have been out and such, they weren't out at this time. They weren't even being worked on at this time. But he was totally Aragorn. He was just like leaning against the tree, like, okay, lady, sure, adventure it is. And I was like so annoyed with him at first, right? His mere presence just drove me crazy. But like, once I got past the initial defiance, we were mainly silent. Like, he gave me space. He respected my space. There was no mansplaining, no, let me introduce you to this adventure you claim to wish for. Even though he probably was Aragorn, goodness. Like, it took me a few days, but I began to see him. I began to appreciate him. And we were finally, like, truly getting to know one another when I took a step that turned out to be the edge of the forest, and I was nearly mowed down by a racing parade float. See, this is when the suspending of disbelief may come in handy. So this doorway of a portal, right? It was along this particular edge of the kingdom. And I think of it as this, like the Earth with the equator, right? Now imagine if on one side of the equator is the fairy kingdom, and the other side of the equator is the human world, the human plane of existence, right? And so we were in these thick, just lush, beautiful woods. Then it was like this, kind of like that open, grassy area that I was originally with the river and between the forests. It was like all grass, but it was like this grass belt almost, like wrapping around the kingdom right there at the edge of it. And now, residing there is a town full of basically guardians, but not like any we've ever been taught here. They looked kind of like gnomes. Like, that's, like, I've considered it like a gnome village all these years, because that's the closest thing I could come to describing these beings, right? And these small beings were so excited about life. Like, seriously, they have been partying for all of eternity, and the party is still going. Don't you worry. Like, it really was about celebrating life, and it's 24/7. There were like these kind of designated times when a lot would take naps, while others kept it going, you know? And then they would wake and, boosh, it's time for that day's races. Let's go. And like, these were legit parade floats, like just flying low down this open space between the two, the edge of the kingdom and this forest, right? And it's like, maybe guarding is wrong, but guardians is what feels right, right? Like, guards tend to have to be so serious, you know, like your life to protect, right? And that's not what they were doing. They were the first town, after taking that left at Albuquerque, if I can use Bugs Bunny for a moment, like, they were so nice and like welcoming, and it was as if we'd always known each other. We instantly became a part of that family, and lost track of time for a bit. I'm not sure of how long we were there for, like maybe like at least a week. Like, what is time? But I realized that I'd lost track of it, and had been so into the constant celebrations and positive vibes, like I got rightfully swept away, huh? And I had a moment of wondering if they were doing this on purpose to help my father. But I knew that wasn't it. I was just being stubborn. And like, we were supposed to be napping, like having our own nap. But I just like sat there, like watching him sleep. We'd become friends and really comfortable with one another. We'd spent so much time talking and vibing and being happy to exist, you know? So of course we both got swept away, right? How could you not? But I still needed to explore. I still needed to see things for myself. I had to. It's like such a severe case of FOMO, right? Like, goodness. Bit of a reminder that no, the grass isn't greener on the other side, because it isn't about the grass. Ultimately, that grass has nothing to do with it, does it? So, while he was sleeping, after much deliberation, I collected my things and I slipped through the doorway. He was totally awake, though. You know it. He knew I needed to do it, though. He knew I was going to do it. Pretty sure everybody did, really. And it was like that quiet pre-dawn where you can hear things still being enjoyed in the distance, but there's like dew on the blades of grass, and it was almost like the air held its breath a moment as I stepped through the door. I did go on a lot of adventures. I met so many people. I laughed, cried, screamed, danced. I got a job as a waitress so that I could be like in the thick of it and be surrounded by these humans and really learn and experience this way of life. All the different cultures and languages and minds, the good, bad, and ugly. Like, I knew I wasn't staying, right? I knew, and I think it helped me for a while to like stay somewhat detached, to personally know that there's so much more beyond this. But over the course of time, once again, I was swept away. I forgot that I was a fairy princess, that there was a doorway I could merely walk through, and all this pain and suffering and confusion and even ecstasy would barely be a figment of my memory. I lost myself in humanity. And then one day, while I was at work, in the middle of the afternoon, in the middle of a blazing hot summer, I'm topping off someone's coffee, and I felt it before I heard it, this buzzing. I figured it was nerves or heartburn or something, right? But then I could hear it. But everyone else was still acting as though things were normal and fine, nothing to see here. And the buzzing grew more and more up in volume. And as it was starting to hurt me, like almost like a sinus headache, like when the air pressure makes you feel like you were hit in the face with a 2x4. But it wasn't actual physical pain. It was all internal, and not just my sinuses. Like the buzzing, however, people finally began to kind of perk up and get curious. Like most places like Denny's or these greasy spoon type restaurants tend to, it had one of those outer walls that was all windows. And I turned to look out those windows and could see this huge cloud, but like you couldn't see around it. It was just this wall of a cloud that was just a huge swarm of things like bees, maybe other things, but I mainly had like bees and such in my mind. And they just came in. It just, like I had a chance to tell people like, hey, get down, get under your tables. Like here in Seattle, at least for me, like at elementary school back then, like we used to do these earthquake drills. So I was like trying to get everybody like, get under your tables, because I knew nobody would get hurt as long as they handled it accordingly, right? And no one was stung. None of the bees were there to attack anyone or cause any suffering of any kind. No. They were there only for a single message. For me. And that question of, is it time to come home yet, or... I basically got a message from my dad saying, yo, it's past your curfew, what are you doing? But there was like no judgment. It was like, is it time yet? Can we get to see you coming home? We miss you. It was so gentle, but it made its point. And in that moment, like I knew, I remembered myself. This isn't my life. This isn't who I am. How did I assimilate? Why? Why would I let go of that? So while people were trying to escape, those last stragglers, most took right off. But I went up to the counter and I took off my apron and I set it and the coffee onto the counter. And I let those who were still present know that it'd been wonderful getting to know them and working alongside them. But it was time to go home now. And I left. I went back to where I'd exited the doorway. And of course it was still there. Always open. And I knew that on the other side, he was waiting for me. However long I needed to take, he was going to be there as I returned through that portal. And that's exactly where he was. Right there, waiting for me with his knowing smile. He completely understood. And we spent the rest of that day or night with I know it's not the right word, but with the gnomes. And it was so helpful, right? To complete that process of shedding that skin, for lack of better words. Sorry if that's too graphic. But I had to let it go. And we returned to my father's castle, and we were married. And my dress was an absolute Disney princess gown, poofy shoulders and everything. Diamonds and crystals all over. And when I stepped outside as we walked down that same sidewalk we met alongside, I sparkled so much. I was like a walking diamond. And we went back to that spot where we met, next to that tree, next to the river of tears. And we sat down together this time, him to my right, kneeling, and with our hands entwined, so in love. But then it was like I was popped out of myself, boop. And I kind of fell back behind her, not down, just stumbled backwards away from this fairy princess sitting there with her honey and her Disney princess gown and her big blonde hair. Seriously, it was like a pageant or something. It was huge. Talk about football helmets for hair. And she turned and she looked at me over her shoulder and she gave me this smile. And I can't tell you whose face this was. She was so familiar. A part of me wants to say, yeah, that was you, but in that moment, I didn't like, it wasn't my face here, you know what I mean? And I didn't know how. My brain hasn't quite known how to process that part, but that smile and the expression, it was more like, see, this is what it really is. And I woke up like, goodness, I've never felt so alive. Like, I didn't learn that I'm autistic on top of the attention deficit until I reached 40. So to say that I was battling depression at that time that I had this dream is an understatement. At the time, I just thought it was so incredible. You know, like, I collected fairies, you know, I love fairies, so silly and mischievous. Like, I really didn't think beyond it just being this dream that, like, maybe a guardian spirit or my grandmother that passed when I was young helped me with. Like, it felt like one of the best messages I could ever receive. And I rode that high for a while, fam. Like, woo. And then one day, maybe 3, at the most 4 years later, my friend and I were talking, and she pointed out something about a book she was reading. A book called Heaven. And the description that's made of God's castle up in heaven. And how closely that description matches the castle of the fairy king from my dream. And over the years, I've heard a lot of stories from those who are sharing these, like, seemingly impossible events in life, you know, like alien abductions and near-death experiences. And what gets me, what always gets me, and has ever since I was young and I first began hearing these stories, is how similar so many stories are when they're coming from those who have never heard another speak of such a thing. They tend to feel so alone in it, you know? When someone responds poorly to something that we express or explain to them, it can cause us to clam up. Like, okay, they think we're crazy, so let's just nah. And then you find yourself hearing a complete stranger describing these things that you thought only you had seen and experienced. I don't think that I had a near-death experience. I mean, maybe something happened to me in my sleep that none of us knows about. True, I'll give you that one. It's all good. But I do believe it was as divine of an experience I have ever had. Well, you know, at least back then. So whatever your opinion may be on this, it's okay. I'm not asking you to believe me, only to hear about my dream. Like, take from it what resonates within you. That's the whole reason I'm sharing this. I had such vivid dreams when I was younger, and a part of my evolution, like too many, has involved trauma. And I've felt like I've had to sacrifice a lot of myself in order to survive. And then recently, however, and I've mentioned this in other videos, I've been trying to remove this suit of armor that I've placed around myself, and so thankful to have been reminded of this dream. I actually forgot about it for a long time. I assimilated. And I came across it in an old journal that I happened to flip through, like, okay, let's see the craziness of 2000 to 2001. Absolutely floored. Like, how could I forget about this? Knowing what I know now, the experiences that I've had since that I've heard others describe, like, I'm so thankful that anyone shares with the world, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram, whatever. Thank you for putting yourself out there. Thank you so much. Others are out here vibing right alongside you. I promise. We really are in this together. And when it's time for us to go home, we're gonna celebrate existence together, okay? You don't have to rush. There's no need to RSVP, and VIP sections are a meaningless human thing. All of this first place, bigger and better, that's human. Don't worry about being enough. It isn't about the superficial things and the mere creature comforts. It's about being alive, and loving, and supporting, and being on these adventures together, even if someone needs their space respected, you know? And until next time, please remember to be kind, but also to revel in it.